We just heard a success story from last year, a digital success story that became physical. And that's probably the key to it. We're not in the matrix, I hope so, at least. So, assuming we're not in the matrix, that was a physical solution we just saw, a physical person there. So welcome to the closing session of this wonderful day. I was actually planning to sit the whole day in this room and listen to pitches, and I haven't. I've been talking to people, meeting people. It was very exciting. And the headline of this session was Digitalization, Who Wants Change and Who Wants to Change? Expectations and opportunities of a dominant trend of our times. Well, we didn't put digitalization is the dominant trend. We will find about that later. So let me invite the panel to the stage. First, let's start with Friedrich Barth. Welcome, Friedrich Barth, from the ISC3, sorry, Friedrich. And if you just could introduce yourself and tell us what the ISC3 is about and what you do there, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very kind, let's say, introduction. And thanks for having me here on this panel, the International Sustainable Chemistry Collaborative Center. Don't try it. It's very complicated. That is why it's ISC3. Well, what we want to do, we are an independent international organization, and we transform chemistry because it's not sustainable enough, and it needs to become more sustainable. And that's our mission. That's enough.
Thank you very much, Friedrich. Take a seat, please. I think that's what the chairs are for. Thank you very much. Next on stage will be Marcel Vollmer. Would you please join us, Dr. Marcel Vollmer? Sorry for the missing title there.
It's just Marcel.
Yeah, it's just Marcel. Hello, Marcel. You're the Chief Innovation Officer of Celonis SE, and honestly, I have no idea what a Chief Innovation Officer has to do. Would you explain and introduce yourself, please?
Stefan, that's a great question, and sometimes I ask myself what's the best way in really developing and bringing innovations to the market. Basically, that's my role now. After 14 years at SAP as Chief Digital Officer, COO, CPO, I'm now joining Celonis, market leader for process mining. So basically, making the visualization of ERP systems or any system possible, that you get a graphic and a design that you can see every single step, every single transaction within your systems, basically in real time, and can also derive actions from it. So basically our vision is in the future that the operating model, how companies running their businesses, will be based on the processes. Therefore you need a solution, an operating model for the future, what Celonis provides you with. So great pleasure being here and looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcel. Please take a seat. You can choose so freely. And last but not least, I want to welcome our host. We've seen him this morning. And thanks again to Henkel and to you in person. Paolo Bavai, Dr. Paolo Bavai. And would you please introduce yourself also shortly and what your role is within the company, Henkel? Please.
Yeah, so my role is I'm the head of corporate venturing for adhesive technologies in Henkel. And I think the rest we explained during the keynote already.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And welcome. Yes, please. Applaud. So before we start, I wanted to take you on a little journey, a little mind journey. If you look to the west, there's a forest, became famous forest, and there's a tree 600 years old. And imagine yourself, before 600 years, in the year 1400 something, knights were roaming that forest, and that tree was just about this big. And the tree survived the Napoleon troops, and the tree survived the First World War, and it survived the Second World War, and it survived the Industrial Revolution. But recently, it got endangered. People were chaining themselves to it, and it was wondering what's happening. Now, when I was preparing for this panel discussion, I really thought, are we talking about the right thing? Is digitalization really the right thing to talk about? Because actually we got physical problems, don't we? We got chemical problems to solve and physical problems to solve. So is digitalization maybe the next bullshit buzzword bingo trail, distracting us as an industry from the real problems outside there? Or are we actually on the brink of having a tool that can help solving these problems? Question to the panel. I don't know. Who wants to start?
Well, I get your point.
Oh, that's great.
Well, digitalization is not the solution. Digitalization is the tool for solutions. Well, chemistry has at the moment chemistry has a lot of problems, the problem is the old business models which are too dirty and unsustainable. There are too many of them, and that has to be transformed. If we digitalize the old business models, that will not help, because then we are not more sustainable than before. So it's not, let's say, applying digitalization to old business models. We need new business models. Change has to come from new business models. And the chemistry, there is one sentence which I always tell to the chemistry with regard to the old business models. The Stone Age didn't stop because there were no stones anymore. And that is what chemistry has to put in its mind. There is a very nice concept, I think, by the German chemical industry, which is called Chemistry 4.0. And it puts it in the right perspective. Because it says Chemistry 4.0 is digitalization plus sustainability. These two together make sense at the end of the day. One doesn't make sense either. And digitalization can be a very important tool to make the sector more sustainable. Yeah? If today, for example, we have many, many products, we don't know what is in there. We don't know how to recycle them because we don't know what is in there. Yeah? And this is what can be changed through digitalization. While I work, for example, a lot with the University of Cambridge, they can mark now a product, a substance even, on molecular level, in order to know exactly what is in there. And you can follow that along the whole value chain. Mm-hmm. And this is, of course, where digitalization makes a lot of sense in order to make this world more sustainable. And what is very important is that the chemistry has to look also to the SDGs. There are so many solutions which are needed. There is really a technology transformation needed. And a lot of the solution has to come from the chemistry. That is why stop defending the old business models, get into innovation, look to the SDGs, and change. That's my first message.
Okay, thank you very much. Who wants to join?
That's a great one, and I couldn't agree more that digitalization or digital transformation will help the world run better and improve people's life. That's definitely what I believe, because we only have one planet. We need to be very sensitive about how we want to use the resources. The chemical industry can definitely help us here to innovate and be more efficient. But on the digital transformation, I think there's a lot also what we need to do. We are talking a lot about it in all industries. Germany is not necessarily known as being leading in this stage. I think most of you will agree on that or might disagree. Very happy. So please join me on one of my drives to the airport and have a conference call with me, and I get interrupted 3 times in the middle of a city or driving a highway. That's a very basic thing about LTE and what's currently a challenge, but that's only one. It is much broader when we talk about that. But I honestly believe that we need really now to define the foundation to be more sustainable, to become more sustainable, and really use all the available information. You mentioned recycling. What's really in the products? How can we reuse the products? How can we get the plastic out of the oceans? How can we be more sustainable in the way how we live? If all the people would consume the same, like in the United States, I lived there for 2.5 years, I can tell you, wow, this is a very resource-intense way on living. This is simply not possible for 7.8 billion, what we are right now on Earth. And I think, therefore, we need to define new ways, and we need also to fight the climate change. Any Americans here? So because I know I have to say climate change does not exist in North America or in the United States because the president decided so. Therefore, it is only the rest of the world impacted by that. But I honestly believe there's a lot what's happening right now on the climate side. And therefore, I think we need to bring the smartest people together to see how we can really overcome that and how we can really use technology to the benefit of all of us, of all humans here, to make the world a better place and also use the resources in the most efficient way. And therefore, technology is needed. We need to understand supply chains, the processes, and we need to understand also what is it what we want to do, the CO2 consumption, the different measures what we have to drive the SDGs, what we have, and to be more successful in the future with a planet, a healthy planet, what we have.
All right. Paolo, how do you see that? Is it just a new buzzword to distract you from the real problems, or does it actually help solve real problems?
I think it's both. I think I agree with Friedrich also that when you have digitalization as a tool to achieve a new business model, which is then more sustainable and brings certain advantages, I think that's fine. But I think when we do talk about digitalization, we sometimes tend to digitalize things just because we can digitalize things without a real purpose behind that. And I think then it's a buzzword, and then it's not really meaningful, and that is something we shouldn't do. So we are, I think, sometimes a little bit distracted and tempted by the technology to do digitalization in areas where it really doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think this is something we need to differentiate a little bit and focus really on the things which make sense and really put our energy there. And I think that's very often missing a little bit, that you really think this to an end and that you really think through, is in this particular case digitalization the right tool or is it not?
Right. I can see that. I mean, we've got so many people going on the streets right now. We've got a change in perception right now, a public change in perception. And the Boston Consulting Group actually stated that competitiveness will not depend on material or technology. It will depend very much on social license to operate. So no matter if it's right or wrong what you do in a sort of economic way or ecological way, people will decide out there whether they let you or they don't, whether they understand the technology behind it or not, or the impact of it behind it or not. So I don't understand quite yet how we could actually do something about it, because let me give you an example. For example, Nigeria is the biggest oil exporting country in Africa. It's number 13 in the world. We're taking the oil from there, we're exporting it to some European country or the US, refining it there. Then we're making plastic out of it in Leverkusen. Then we're making bottles, etc., somewhere else. Then we're filling it with consumer goods. Then we're re-importing them to Nigeria. They dump it into the river Niger, and the Niger is the third largest emittent of plastics in the world. How can digitalization help overcome that kind of business model? It doesn't sound right. People haven't understood yet the complexity, probably. But maybe someday people will chain themselves to Henkel front door and say, no more, no matter what they understand. So how can that help? Or is that really, or how can we put it into the right sort of perspective towards the problem?
I mean, maybe digitalization is not the solution to all of the sustainability issues we have in the world, right? So I think we have talked also about recycling processes and more sustainable and biodegradable products and so on to help to cope with these issues with regards to sustainability. So I'm not so sure if digitalization is here the answer to everything.
Right.
But I think it definitely can help by providing the transparency about what's happening. For example, if we get scampies in the North Sea, we are shipping them to Africa to basically peel it, and then we freeze it and ship it back to sell it. So these are things basically not everyone is aware of that. Also, the story what you just elaborated on by sharing the oil getting out of Nigeria and then plastic is getting imported back. Things like that. I think in the past we were not able to really get the full transparency about the supply chains. And this is the first step for me, getting the transparency and then to define the right actions, for example, to make a price for what we do on the exporting side for plastic, for example, to ensure that it's not getting back in the ocean. As we know, it takes ages that the plastic disappears and probably will never disappear. It will become microplastic, and microplastic is currently a problem. All things about we weren't aware, and digitalization helps us to understand it. So first, we need to frame the problem, get the transparency. Second, we need to define actions, what to do, how to really ensure that we become more sustainable. And then the third step is really to change the way how we live, because the overall population is growing. So therefore, we need to define new ways on how we want to live on this planet with the existing growing population what we have. And this means a new way in using the resources, and only with digitalization, for me, it will be possible to make this change happen.
So how exactly would help how would exactly help digitalization to that the bottle is put in the Niger River?
I tell you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Friedrich.
Well, because we just prepare a project at this moment with one of a larger, let's say, with a larger chemical company, because what I see now, 3 years ago, the chemical industry said, plastics in the sea, plastics in the environment, not our problem. Waste problem, not our thing. They have recognized now, they see, they learn. I hope that they stay on this curve. And we have now said, okay, we target in particular Lagos and the Niger River to do a project there, to demonstrate that it can be solved. Well, we shouldn't discuss the oil business models on this globe. This is another discussion, yeah? But one of the problems is now when we make at the moment baseline studies, what kind of plastics is there, what can we do with it, yeah? How can we deal with it, and so on. And one of the basic problems is to know what kind of plastic we have there. Yeah, this is one of the key problems. So in order to decide, okay, can it go into recycling? Let's say, do we have to burn and use the energy? A solution which we would say here, very difficult, yeah, at the moment, but for that local circumstance, they don't have energy, yeah, probably an interim solution until, and that is what we do there, we go into a local circular economy on plastics. Plastics has a lot of disadvantages, but the right polymers, and that is the innovation we need, the right polymers are probably have very interesting properties, let's say, to go really into a circular economy, to enable a circular economy. And that together then with digitalization, that you can mark, yeah, on the molecular level, this is this polymer, this plastic, and you can do this and this and this. The additives are another problem, yeah, how you deal with this. But then if this comes together, then you can enable them. And we look at the moment, for example, also on solutions for very decentralized chemical recycling, where we know the large business models on chemical recycling, they're not profitable at the moment, if you calculate, because the oil is too cheap. Yeah, and there is no CO2 price yet. But of course, with let's say with all of that coming into place, we try to demonstrate now on the ground how a country like Nigeria can, let's say, achieve that also with local innovation. Yeah, and this is where digitalization can play a role, and it's a very hard way to go, but we have to try.
I think either technology will help us, that we either get rid of the problem with plastics, for example, or we are simply no longer using the plastic as we know it today, because we come up with new products, more sustainable, where we don't run in situations like that. But doesn't it start with having the transparency first? For example, that Niger is the #1 river in Africa polluting plastic waste into the ocean. I think this is also, if you know a problem, you can attack it and you can think about that. And I think we are all asked now to define the next steps here to overcome that.
Absolutely, but the problem is also partly that it's a problem in the society in these countries, right? This is not like these are very bad people throwing the bottles into the river and being responsible for one of the main polluters in the world. I think it's really a problem which starts in the society and needs to be attacked there and dealt there with it. And so I think we always like to think that the technology will help us and resolve the problems. And honestly, I think in terms of digitalization, I think that is not the case. It can be part of the equation, but there is many other factors which need to be resolved, dealing with issues in the society, dealing with substitutes for plastics, dealing with other kind of plastic materials, and so on, dealing with better recycling purposes. And of course, I mean, the example was the Niger River, but I'm Italian, and when I go to Italy, I can tell you that there is a lot of pollution in the environment with plastics, and not because of some missing digitalization. The issue simply is that the collection system of the plastics is not as sophisticated as probably here in Germany. And so people, I mean, put their waste, which used to be recycled, in some little bags in front of their house on the street, and then nobody is picking that properly up, and there comes a big storm, and it's get distributed, and nobody is, feeling responsible for that anymore, for that bottle, which is then finding its way into a river and into the sea. So I think it's much more than just digitalization.
But what is necessary is, that we don't point to say, okay, we cannot do something, this is governance. We cannot do something because this is technology. We cannot do something because this is this and this fault. Yeah,
we can do a lot.
No, because what we have to do is, I think we need to collaborate in a completely different way than in the past. Absolutely. All different players, players like you, then people who have the expertise from the digital side, the governments, who probably have to also do their job. But this new type of collaboration, this is urgently needed to solve these type of problems.
Okay, if I can interrupt there, because obviously we would say, well, that's a problem in Nigeria, that's probably hard to tackle, and we have a corrupt regime probably, etc., etc. Let's go to Germany. We got the e-mobility going on right now. And as you might know or not know, a lithium battery is not just made out of lithium ions and some plastics, it's made out of cobalt too. And we're facing huge problems there if everybody wants to use a lithium ion accumulator in their car, because cobalt is mainly dug out of the ground by non-skilled workers by hand out of the Congo ground. And as we know, Congo is a civil war zone. And lithium ion or lithium is going to be dug out of the Atacama Desert. Well, that's a desert, and it's just a few people and a few insects maybe that will be affected, not so big of a trouble. Again, it's lacking transparency. If we are going to have 1 million e-cars on the streets within the next 10 years, we are having the next big problem, because we don't know where to put the accumulators, we don't know how to recycle them, we don't know where to put the heavy metal waste, and we got everything in place. We got all the information actually at hand. It's just a click away in Google or YouTube or wherever. The ZDF has a video on it or a movie on it. So it's not a problem to get all of that. We've got a government, it's supposedly not corrupt, we got all the institutions in place. So why are we going down that path that I would say doesn't feel very right now?
It's certainly a great question, and I would ask the question in general, is this the right technology, what we are looking at right now? First of all, Germany is not really advanced in lithium battery technology, how to get the energy and how to produce the batteries. On the other side, everyone talks about e-mobility and using e-scooters, e-bikes. I think overall it's a great idea to become more sustainable and rethink the way how we define transportation. Everyone knows the car is unused 95% of its time, and still so many people having cars right now. I think we need now to look more in what is really the future technology we want to support. Where's also the automotive industry, for example, going? Look at Tesla. For me, an unbelievable example. A company never produced really something different than one convertible, a very nice one, is disrupting an entire industry with millions of cars going to a market cap higher than Ford or General Motors, and basically bringing a new technology to the market. And that's for me a beautiful example on a successful digital transformation. I'm not saying that this is the right one and lithium batteries are the right technology for that, but the shift, the mindset shift, what happens to go for different ways than the gas combustion engines, I think this is a great example also by innovating and then define a new business model. And I think we need to understand the end-to-end processes, which starts from what gets in a product, how to do the recycling at the end, and also what is the lifetime and what is the waste, what we create with that. And I believe we need all the insights what technology can provide us to really take the right decisions here.
But this is a great example, the mobility side, where we go far too easy to say, okay, we have a mobility problem with what is today e-mobility. That's very linear thinking.
Yes, 50% of
linear. Well, e-mobility might play a role at the end of the day, but we have to change the system, and not just one mean of moving from A to B. So and then now comes the chemistry. So what is the reaction normally then? Okay, they say, oh, e-mobility. So I have to do my product for e-mobility. And that's the wrong approach. Step back and say, what do we need? We probably need a different type of fuel. We probably need a completely different type of energy storage. A different battery system. Artificial photosynthesis, let's say for hydrogen, whatever. Yeah, but step back and really think from the beginning, and that is, I think, what is very necessary and what only the chemistry can provide. And then from the beginning in this, when you think about, okay, what would we need as a future mobility system, then work with these guys from the beginning, in the innovation, yeah? And then also what is necessary, because everybody is crazy about innovation, but we have to be very careful. The innovations of today might be the problems of tomorrow. If we don't check them carefully, are they really sustainable? Are they a real sustainable solution? And digitalization might help, and that's my next point where digitalization can play a role. We work again with the University of Cambridge to use artificial intelligence to assess the sustainability of future business models. Because we don't have a lot of data with, let's say, with what innovation is. So you need modeling. And you can, what we do today, we have a couple of criteria, we look at that, This is very old-fashioned. We can do much better in assessing what real innovation is and what real innovation we need. And there digitalization can play, and let's say, you can play a real part, but it has to be done at the beginning all together in collaboration.
Yeah, so if you look at the processes end to end, so if you think that lithium-ion batteries is a good technology to drive an electric car, then I mean, if you build a car, if the automotive industry builds a car, they need to prove that they can take the car apart and recycle the pieces of the car. So you can also make that regulation for the battery itself and for certain car components. You can say, well, if you introduce a certain battery into a car, you need to be able to take it apart and to recycle the different pieces of that battery. So in order to actually think these things to an end and to make sure it is really circular and you don't go one way. Yep. And I personally think that because of exactly that reason, but that's my personal opinion, that the battery-driven cars are not really the future. I think it's a bridging technology until you have a fuel cell technology, which is, I think, a much better power storage for an electrical car than a lithium-ion battery. But I think right now, the fuel cell technology is not developed so well. So you need a bridging technology that might be lithium-ion batteries, but I also think if you don't do that in a responsible and sustainable way, then then it hurts more than it helps in the end.
Okay. Paolo, I think that we probably need to rethink the concept of mobility.
Yeah.
That's what I believe, to see what is really needed, because we want to have transportation at a certain point in time. After this session, I want to go back to the airport to catch my flight back home. Also not a very sustainable way, I fully admit that, from the CO2 consumption and footprint. But basically, how can we really define the future concept on driving mobility? Because adding more cars or just exchanging the way how cars are basically powered might not solve the real problem in a growing population. Africa is going from 1 billion to 4 billion until the end of the century. Think about that. If they go to the same level like we, the same number of cars, what this would do. Therefore, I think we need really to come to new concept, new innovative ways. Battery technology, I agree on that, might be a bridging technology to the next step, but we need now to work and think really about what is it what people want, and also what is it what the planet can provide as resources.
That's both, right? It's the one aspect is on how to use transportation, how to use the cars, and how you go from A to B. That's one aspect. And the other aspect is that if you pick to use something which moves you from A to B, whatever that is, you need to make sure it is in a responsible way propelled and moved forward.
You see, one mistake we make, and what politics makes, politics should never favor a concrete technology. Because with that, they make problems with the other technologies which might be already there and which might be much better. The politics should always set the framework to say mobility should be very much lower in emission. Yeah, and then leave it also to the innovation to say, okay, what is the best? And then really allow the competition between the innovations. If they favor one technology, you stop basically all the rest. And that is what we have done, let's say, for the past all the time. Yeah, in particular in energy.
That is true, but I think they think to simplify a message, how they can transport the message that people understand that. And if you are providing abstract concepts about transportation, nobody will really understand that, and you don't get elected. If you say, well, I want 1 million electrical cars on the street by then, it's a very clear target. Everybody understands that and can elect you. So I think that is something you cannot circumvent, probably, if you want these politicians to be elected.
One of many things on the politics which is not working, and giving such targets might not make really sense.
And we need transparency for. I mean, I think, again, remember social license to operate. I think it will be decided on the streets for us. So we need to move, and it's urgent too. We all. So to speak with Holger Geisler's words from IP Ocean, collaboration is key. It's a complex system, gives complex answers. As you said, there is no easy answer.
No, nobody can do it alone.
No oil, no something. It's going to be a complex, very multiple dimensional solution probably. Now looking at my watch here, time's up, and you have the opportunity for a closing remark. You want to make the first or the last statement? You can choose. As the host, you choose.
That doesn't matter. I just want to say that I mean, sustainability is something which is for Henkel, for example, extremely important. And when it comes to transparency, of course, we are always thinking about the different technologies, how to detect the different plastics and make these things transparent. But I think also we should not forget about social media. I mean, when I was, a kid, nobody talked about many issues, but they did exist. So, but why didn't I get these issues? Because social media didn't exist, and it was much more difficult to transport these messages into a greater audience. And social media is now allowing for that, and I hope that this will increase the pressure on industry and politics to do something about it.
Thank you very much.
You first.
Well, one of the outcomes of this is that collaboration is key. I'm very happy because I'm a collaborative center. So come and work with us.
Thank you very much.
Great closing remarks. I think we really need to look at the end-to-end process. What does it do, and how can we use technology, digitalization, the digital transformation for the better. And that's exactly also what excited me on Celonis, getting the visibility from an end-to-end perspective, but also defining actions based on what you see, the transparency you get. And I think that's also what helps us looking at end-to-end processes and hopefully then define the right actions supported by politics. Couldn't agree more on that. We need to have a framework we are working in, and then basically use and leverage the right technology in the future, helping us, and hopefully digitalization will help the world run better and improve people's lives.
Thank you very much for that, and let's hope digitalization helps that tree live another 600 years. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to the panel, and that was a great discussion. I loved listening to you, and I hope it was great listening to them for the audience as well. And it's your applause. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, as I mentioned in the video, orange and blue, we have to make a change. We have to rethink our industry. And this is my take-home message. Marcel, Friedrich, Paolo, and Stefan, this is also your applause. It was a great discussion. Just two more things. I do not know whether we have a slide for that, but it was mentioned already. So you're invited to be back in February next year, 27th of February in 2020 in Frankfurt. Be back again. We expect more than 1,000 people from all over the world. And now the other slide, for those who are in the city tomorrow morning, still in the city, we have the traditional breakfast over here in the location in the main station of Düsseldorf, and you are invited by my company, BCNP Consultants. And now nothing more to say. Enjoy the get-together. Thanks for having you with us, and I hope you had a successful day. Thanks.